Frank Heffley leaned back in his recliner, the flickering glow of the television painting the living room in shades of blue. The house was quiet, the good kind of quiet. Susan was puttering around the kitchen, the smell of chocolate chip cookies drifting through the air. Outside, Greg and Rowley's laughter bubbled up from the street as they raced their bikes. Roderick's muffled drums thumped from upstairs. Manny was somewhere, probably drawing on walls or hiding contraband candy. Life was perfect. Frank took a slow sip of beer, letting himself savor the moment. His eyes lazily drifted toward the hallway, and then his stomach dropped. The bathroom door looked wrong. Not broken, not dirty, just off. Like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The edges seemed to blur, the wood grain shifting like static. For a fraction of a second, it didn't look like a door at all, just a jagged tear in the air, something dark pulsing behind it. Frank blinked hard. It was just a door again. He exhaled, rubbing his eyes. Too much TV. The next day, it happened again. He was walking past the hallway when a cold prickle ran down his spine. His head turned against his will. The bathroom door was slightly open, and inside, black. Not shadow, not darkness. A thick, liquid nothing, swallowing the light. Frank's breath hitched. "Roderick," he called. "Come here." Roderick trudged down the stairs, mouth full of cereal. "What?" Frank pointed. "Tell me what you see." Roderick squinted. A door. Does it look weird to you?" Roderick stared at him. "Are you having a stroke?" Frank turned to Susan next. She was wiping flour off her hands, smiling absently. "Honey, look at the bathroom door. Does it seem different to you?" Susan glanced over, then back at him, brow furrowed. "Frank, it's a door." Frank's hands trembled. Maybe he was losing it. He went to his room to lie down, but when he opened the door, Manny was standing in the center of his bed, motionless. His tiny frame was rigid, arms limp at his sides. His face was blank, no mischief, no smirk. Just wide, unblinking eyes, staring straight through Frank. Frank's blood turned to ice. "Manny." "The bathroom door," Manny whispered. His voice was hollow, like something mimicking speech. Then, without another word, he climbed down and walked out, his footsteps making no sound. Frank's pulse roared in his ears. He turned back toward the hallway. The bathroom door was open wider now, and inside, the darkness breathed. Frank shouldn't touch it. He knew he shouldn't, but his hand moved on its own. His fingers brushed the wood, and the world screamed. Frank didn't pass out. 1 second, he was standing in his hallway. The next, he was on his knees, gasping, his vision swimming in and out of focus. The house was wrong. The colors were gone. Everything was washed in grayscale, the walls a sickly, corpse-like pallor. The air was thick with the stench of copper and something sour, something rotting. Frank gagged. "Susan," he choked out. Silence. "Roderick? Greg?" Nothing. He staggered to his feet, his legs shaking. The living room was just ahead. Maybe they were there. Maybe they were fine. Frank stepped forward, and the smell hit him like a punch. Blood. So much blood. Susan was sprawled across the couch, her stomach split open from throat to pelvis. Her intestines spilled out in glistening, purple-red coils, draped over the cushions like grotesque streamers. Her hands were clamped around her own ribs, fingers dug into the meat as if she tried to hold herself together. Her mouth was stretched in a silent scream. Roderick was slumped against the TV stand, his head totally crushed, like something enormous had pressed down until his skull caved in. One eye bulged from its socket, staring blindly. His teeth were scattered across the carpet. Greg and Rowley were tangled together near the doorway, their limbs bent at impossible angles. Greg's chest was unzipped, his ribs pried apart like a grotesque butterfly, his lungs deflated and shriveled. Rowley's face was gone, just a wet, red crater, his jaw hanging by a strip of tendon. And Manny, Frank's legs gave out. Manny sat in the center of the room, cross-legged, like he'd been placed there. His skin had been peeled back in precise, surgical strips, revealing glistening muscle beneath. His tiny hands were folded neatly in his lap, the bones of his fingers exposed where the flesh had been carefully flayed. His face was still intact, but his lips were sewn shut with thick, black thread, his eyelids cut away so his glassy, doll-like eyes stared forever. And then he heard a sound. Outside. Frank's head snapped toward the window. The street was filled with people. Neighbors. Dozens of them. Standing perfectly still. Watching. Their faces were slack, their eyes wide and unblinking. Some smiled. Some wept, all of them dripping, blood from their noses, their ears, their tear ducts. Frank screamed. No sound came out. And then, a whisper in his skull. The bathroom door. He had to touch it again. Frank didn't question it. He ran, stumbling over Greg's mangled corpse, slipping in Susan's spilled organs. The door was there, waiting. He reached out. Light. Sound. Laughter. Frank. Jesus, what's wrong with you? Susan's voice. Frank gasped, blinking hard. He was on the floor, his family crowded around him, their faces twisted in concern. Susan gripped his shoulders. You just collapsed. Are you okay? Roderick scowled. Dude, you look like you're gonna puke. Greg chewed his lip. Dad. Manny stood at the edge of the group, silent, watching. Frank's mouth opened. No words came out. He looked past them, down the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. Normal. Just a door. Frank swallowed. He didn't answer them. He just stood, walked past his family, and sank into his recliner. The television played on, meaningless noise filling the silence. From the corner of his eye, the bathroom door stood shut. Frank didn't look at it. He would never look at it again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house was too still, he could hear it creaking open. And beneath the sound of the TV, beneath the hum of the fridge, beneath the distant laughter of his family, he could hear something breathing behind it.